Welcome to CyberBytes, the podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Cooper, co-founder of Asperon Search. Today's guest, we have Brian Contos. With 2 IPOs and 8 acquisitions under his belt, Brian has helped build some of the most successful cybersecurity startups in the world. He has over 25 years experience in the industry. This episode's not one to be missed. How are you, mate?
Hello. It's great to be here.
Man, every time I see you on LinkedIn, you're somewhere else in the world. So how's the travel schedule been?
It's been nuts. Last year was a lot of international. So I was doing quite a bit in Eastern Europe, Western Europe as well, but a lot in Eastern Europe and Asia Pac. This year has been all over the United States. So a lot of those trips from San Francisco to Washington, D.C. and Boston have been happening. But it's been great. We've been super busy.
Yeah, nice. Was it B-Sides, Georgia that I saw recently? Was it?
Yeah, I was in B-Sides Augusta, it's really interesting. So first off, it's kind of a really small place and a very small airport to get to. But you get to this town and you get to this B-Sides and there's like 1,000+ attendees.
Oh, wow.
It's one of the, in my opinion, my humble opinion, it's one of the best B-Sides in the US every year. It's right up there with like New York and Seattle and some of the other, really big, really great B-Sides events.
Nice. Good to know. I'll put a link in the show notes of how people can check that out. And look, Brian, so with all my guests, I like to give the audience a bit of an idea of who you are and how you got into the industry. So can you give me a run through? I know you've got two IPOs, 8 acquisitions under your belt.
Yeah, or as my wife likes to measure them, again, about 5 pounds per company. Little does she know it's closer to 6.5 pounds. Yeah, I've been doing this way too long, man. It's been over 25 years. It's been fantastic. I love the space. I started with DISA down in Fort Huachuca, Arizona, doing which is the Defense Information Systems Agency, which is a branch of the government. And I started my career there while I was in college. And then when I graduated, I moved down to Brazil, to Sao Paulo, and worked for Bell Labs. Completely went like, I want to do something completely different from government work. And I did that for a few years, made some really close friends, then came back to the US and helped build my first startup, which was Riptech, which was an MSSP with Amit Yaron, who's now the CEO of Tenable. He was also the CEO of NetWitness and a bunch of other great people. We sold that to Symantec, and I was just a kid. We were sitting on spools of RJ45 cable back in that day. It was truly a startup. Sold that. I kind of got the startup bug, and then just kept on building companies. So I helped build another company called ArcSight with Hugh and Jamanzi. I know somebody that you've met in the past. Took that public and then was acquired after it went public. Then did Imperva, which Shlomo Kramer, which of course went public. McAfee Labs, McAfee, which we ended up selling to Intel. I wrote a couple books in between that time period. My last book was with the director of the NSA, Bill Kroll, deputy director. Then I did Solera. We sold that to Blue Coat. And then I kind of said, let's stop. I'll do some boards. I'll just kind of, peel off for a little bit. And then a few months later, a company came around called Verodin with some friends that I had met back in my ArcSight days. We built that up and we just sold that to Mandiant and then Google about a year and a half ago. We did that. And now I'm with Sevco, which is an asset intelligence company, fantastic company, really focused on helping organizations get visibility into their devices, their applications, their users, the vulnerabilities across those devices in the cloud, on-prem, and it becomes a really foundational part of both security and IT as well as GRC. So really fun company. Nice. It's been a great career. No regrets. Got to see the world a few times over. I think 55 countries now, but no, it's been a blast.
Wow. Where do I start? First of all, let's talk about building companies. So obviously worked at a few now. Let's talk about some of the secret sauces or what specifically stands out if I was to say, what do you think it takes to build a successful startup? Because a lot of the audience that will be founders that listen to this, what sort of secret sauce or ingredients do you think that folks need to think about?
Yeah, I wish there was an easy button. And if there is, I haven't found it. It takes a lot of work. And that will be in the first chapter of any book you read about building startups. But really, that I kind of boil it down to this. You have to embrace the suck, because there's times where it's just awful. You're sleeping at the office, you're traveling, 6, maybe even 7 days out of the week. You haven't seen your family, your friends. It's hard. But if you can get through it and you can figure out a way to balance it and drive through, it's so rewarding. Because nothing against people that want to work for a large monolithic company. We all have to do our own things, but man, the amount of DNA that you can get on this company. So when you show up, the company shows up in an article, or, a customer says, hey, this is great, and they buy or they renew, or a strategic partner decides they want to work with you. It's so personal, right? And it will get you through those bad times if it's truly what you want to do. Or you might do it and say, this is just not for me. But a lot of it comes down to, I find very early on, is having a really good core group of individuals in the team. And that might be leadership. It could be engineers. It could be any group in the company that really have a vision for what they want to do. And if you can say, if you believe in that vision, and then you start building brand around that, right? You start doing road shows, you start doing marketing, you get some early adopter customers, and they give you some feedback on how to grow value. You get some early partners that say, hey, this is, if you do this, we can resell it. Or if you do this, we can integrate this into our service. If that vision's there and you believe in it and it's solid and the market's ready for it, everything just kind of falls into place. This becomes a question of execution. And that execution, again, is that whole embrace the suck part. You got to, it's white knuckles, kind of, sleeping at the office, grinding away type stuff. But eventually you get there. And man, that's just such a great feeling. Yeah. There's nothing else I've found in the world that's as fun as that point where you feel like, yeah, this company is on the right track. We've made it. It doesn't necessarily mean you've been acquired, you've gone public, but everything just is sort of working and flowing. And man, it's addictive. It
yeah.
really is.
Out of the companies that you did work for, obviously 2 IPO and 8 acquisitions, were any like notable that you joined and it just sort of blew, or was any that you sort of didn't almost join and then you did take the shot or the risk and then it just went?
Yeah, so again, early in my career, so my first one was Riptech, and then my second one was ArcSight. ArcSight used to actually be called Wahoo Networks. It was in the back of what looked like a dentist office in Sunnyvale. And then they quickly changed their name to ArcSight because Wahoo sounded a little too much like Yahoo. But Wahoo is a fish. The transition was this. I mean, when we built Riptech, we really were kids, and let's be honest, we didn't really know what we were doing in terms of building a business. We understood the tech and we understood what we wanted to do. We wanted to build this MSSP, and it just, some of it was luck and it kind of worked out. And we just had some great people like Amit Yaron and Grant Geyer and some other people, and Tim Belcher that drove it. When I thought I was going to take like, a year off, and I ended up taking like 3 weeks off. And I had a few companies that I thought were really interesting. And I do what people do. I build the spreadsheets and the pros and the cons and the things like that, and why I should join them. And then there was this little company, Wahoo, ArcSight. And I'm like, yeah, they're pretty much doing what we did as an MSSP, but in a box. Because this ArcSight was a SIM, but it predated the term SIM. Right. It wasn't even a thing back then. We called it enterprise security management. Gartner later on named it SIM years later. And I'm like, man, it sounds really interesting, but I don't know if I like buy into it. Like they're really doing what they say. So I remember I sat down with Hugh Njamanzi, who was one of the founders, and he was the CTO over there. And we just went into this room for an interview. It was supposed to be an hour. Literally, I think it was a 6-hour interview. And I won't even call it an interview. It was a discussion and whiteboarding, sharing ideas. And by the time that was done, I was like, man, this is going to be awesome. They don't have any customers yet. I don't even think we had any sales reps at that time, but I go, this is what I want to sink my teeth into. And then, fast forward 6.5 years, we had a fantastic exit. And that was one that I was in a balance of saying, well, they're so small. There's no customers. The risk is high. The reward is great, but the risk is high. The earlier you join a company, generally the more reward there is, the higher the risk. But it just worked out. But I remember I was sitting with my wife in the living room, and we had one of those reticulating fans. And I said, I'm going to write the name of each company that I'm interested in on a piece of paper, and they're going to throw them all up by this fan. Whichever one lands closest to me, that's the one I'm going to pick. And I threw them all up, and I forgot who landed close. I think it was Qualys at the time. And I'm going, no, don't want to do Qualys. Let's do this again. So in my heart, I knew what I was going to do. I just had to let my brain kind of talk myself into doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, amazing. And what about you mentioned the suck and the harsh reality of a startup you mentioned. Like what is like one of the biggest challenges that you found across all of the, is there any one particular challenge that come up at every single one?
Yeah, there are challenges that come across every single one. One of the things I saw early on, and this is indicative of just the tech industry itself, and it's not only the tech industry, but it's indicative of tech and certainly startups, is you see a lot of divorces, right? You see a lot of people go through a lot of emotional issues just because of the challenging work schedule. You know, some folks will say, "Hey, I watched the show Silicon Valley. It looks like building a startup would be really fun. There's, fireman poles and ball pits and things like that." And that's not what it's like. And if you want, you want to know how much vacation you're going to get, and are you going to get reimbursed for further education, and is there going to be this or that? There isn't. It's a grind. And some people embrace that and like it, and some don't. And it can have a huge impact on family as well. Like I said, a lot of divorces in this space. I don't know what the statistics are, but I can tell you in the companies that I've done, unfortunately, I've seen this happen a lot. A lot of people go through those issues, a lot of mental health issues as well, because it is a grind. The other thing that tends to be pretty high is there's a high level of travel associated with these types of jobs, and that can be hard on people physically as well. Like I said, I've gained about 6.5 pounds per month. And it's I don't want to just blame it all on United Airlines, but I'm sure it doesn't help when you're sitting on 16-hour flights all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, you see that, and then there's, you've got to make friends with the analysts, and you've got to make friends with the press, and you've got to do these events and this event, and you've got to pay exorbitant fees to be at this event that's going to have all these CISOs that you want to get involved with. So there's a bit of a gamification of it, and if you do these things, there's a reward, and you kind of know that these are some of the steps you have to take, and some of those things are more fun than others. But at the end of the day, there's more good than bad. And you can't have a front without a back. You can't have good without bad, black without white. There's always two sides of things. There's just a balance to it. But at the end of the day, I think there's more good, and it's just really rewarding. You make lifetime friends. Of all those companies I built, like you mentioned at the beginning, 2 IPOs, 8 acquisitions, I would say 85% of them, I've done it with the people that I've been doing it since the very first day. So you build this wrecking crew of people, and sometimes they're investors, sometimes they're board members, sometimes they're engineers, salespeople, BD, all across the board. And the group grows and shrinks and grows and changes and morphs through the years, but you kind of have this core group of people that you trust, and you've been through the trenches with them. And yeah, it's nice to be able to do it with people.
On that people front,
yeah,
obviously, look, talent is at the heart of every successful startup and business success in general. As you progress through the ranks, obviously, I know you have a tight circle around you, but when you were sort of interviewing and looking for candidates, what sort of characteristics, attributes, functional expertise were you sort of looking for when you were specifically hiring yourself?
Yeah. What's interesting is very little attention was paid to what college did somebody go to, or even what degree they had. I think that's kind of interesting in security. You do certainly find people with CS degrees, and that's common, especially amongst developers, but not always. And you see a lot of people with degrees, backgrounds in philosophy or biology, or something English, which is really interesting because it brings in all these different perspectives, and it's particularly valuable in sort of the threat intelligence space, people that actually do threat intelligence analysis. It's great to have different backgrounds, linguists and things like that. So I don't put a lot of stock into sort of, where you went to school, or even if you went to school, or what you studied. It's really, do you have the drive? Do you have the hunger to do it? Because you might be great at a Cisco or a Microsoft or an HP, nothing against those companies, but you might not be a fit for a startup. And I've seen a lot of square pegs put into a round hole, where people try to make it work because they think it's what they want to do. And if you don't have that fire, it's not a question of age. There's young people that have that fire, and there's people that are much older that have their fire. There's men that have it, there's women that have it. There's no sort of demarcation point there. But if you have that hunger, that's what I look for. You have to be smart, you have to be driven, and this is very cliche, but you have to be a team player, because there's no way to build a successful startup by yourself. You can't just have one person. You have to do it as a team, because when one person doesn't do their job in a startup, the entire company feels it, because you're not running with extra fat. You're very lean. And if this person doesn't do their job, it has a domino effect on everybody else. And you have to have people that understand that what they're doing is really important. Where at a larger company, there might be 5 or 6 or 100 other people that might pick up some of that slack. You don't have that at a startup, at least not at a successful startup.
There's a lot of noise about the cybersecurity skills gap, particularly for like a CISO. What can a CISO do to sort of bridge that skills gap if they've got sort of a few resources or no resources at all? Yeah, have you got any ideas about what they can do?
Yeah, I think one thing is, like I said, cast a wider net. Don't go in there thinking I need somebody with, a decade of experience in Python or something like that, or they have to be, all these different certifications. Those things are great and they're nice to have. But a lot of what you do in security is kind of on the job training and learning from mistakes and sort of pulling people in. So I'd say open yourself up to finding some people that are more junior, helping to bring them up to speed. Not in a startup environment, but with a larger company, you can go ahead and have them, get some other certs, get some vendor certifications or get their CISSP or whatever the certification, of the month happens to be. And that's fantastic, but it's that on the job training. And the other thing is really focus on cross training. Since the early days, the people that were good enough to really look at a whole bunch of log files and events and determine this is a real attack or a false positive, you can't pay them enough money to sit there and look at a screen all day at logs and events to find out what's a real attack and what's a false positive. It's not very interesting. But if you keep those people rotating and doing different things, they learn a little bit about endpoint, a little bit about network, system administration, network security, identity, data security, and they get exposed. It really makes them better, and then they're more effective at their job. So look at people that are more junior. Don't necessarily feel like you have to bring somebody on that has a computer science background. Open yourself up there. Be open to getting them some various types of training like SANS and things of that nature, and let them cross train for that on the job stuff. And if you have a smart, driven individual, it doesn't matter what their background is, they will probably succeed in that role, or they won't. And then if they do, fail fast, cycle it through and bring somebody else on board. But I've found that generally speaking, that if you get those smart, motivated people, it doesn't matter where you put them, they're going to pretty much be successful.
With people, obviously, comes culture. How did the businesses that you worked for in the past, how were they really driving great cultures? Because I imagine they must have had them to go through such success.
Yeah. Probably the best analogy, I think, is you're a band of pirates. And it's kind of like your company against the world, especially when you're like a 20-person startup and you're going against these 20,000 people behemoths, right? And you're fighting and you're scrapping for every single win, whether that win is a security award or a customer or a partnership or whatever it is. Everything is a fight, and that culture of sort of being, a band of brothers or a group of pirates, whatever analogy you like to use, it's true. And you do. And that's, again, why so many people that build startups, when they do another one, they want to bring in their close circle that they've been through those battles with before. So it's that mentality. It's that culture. And it's also, and I should mention, it's a fun culture. It's definitely, startups, generally speaking, are a work very hard and play very hard culture. And sometimes they play too hard. I mean, there's certainly been times where we've certainly overdone it. And especially in the early days, maybe not quite as much anymore, but it's just because these people become your friends, your really close friends, or just not coworkers. And the bond that you create is so much longer lasting and so much tighter, I think, again, just my opinion, than what it would be if you worked for a large company. So culture is extremely important. And a big part of that is you don't want to hire jerks. This person could be the very, very best in their field. Yeah, but if they don't click with you from a cultural perspective, it's going to be a negative. So don't bring them on. It's just not going to fit. And sometimes you try to force it and you learn, and it's a mistake, and hopefully you learn from those mistakes. You're going to make a lot of mistakes. So again, fail fast, but you have to get people that can work together well, and they're going to have each other's back. Because if someone's doing 20 hours a day trying to make something so you have a successful POC, and they're grinding away, if you don't have that friendship, if you don't have that tight relationship, it's just business, then it's not going to work. It's not going to be successful, because that's not what it takes.
Yeah. When did you begin investing in companies yourself?
I'd say about 5 years ago,
Okay.
maybe 6. And it got to the point where I was like, well, I love building companies. So it's definitely my number one thing I like to do. Being on boards is fantastic as well. You don't get nearly as operationally deep in what you do, but you can sort of provide guidance and strategy, and that's fun too. And investing is kind of like a little bit of both, because while you're not as hands-on, your money's in it, and you're very, you're very interested in the success of it, and you want to see it go forward. And so you're working almost as hard for those companies as you would for an operational company, in terms of supporting them and directing them and connecting them with other individuals. So that's a lot of fun too. Doesn't be sort of, being in the company and doing that thing, but it is fun, and I really do enjoy it. And there's so many talented individuals and companies out there. You can't work with them all. So if you can invest in some of them and get involved that way, that's a lot of fun.
What about your investment thesis? So what were you looking for when you made your investments in what were some of the companies? Can you plug them?
Yeah. So I'll talk about one. So Phosphorus, which is it's an IoT security company, XIoT. So their focus is on discovering and securing things like printers, security cameras, voice over IP phones, all the little computers that aren't traditional computers. Organizations could have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of these things. So it's a big security thing. First thing I look at is the leadership. Do they have the leadership team in place, or are there plans to put those key people in place to make this effective? Because without that, things can't really get momentum, or at least at the speed that you desire. Things just take a lot longer. So leadership team's number one. The second thing is market timing. You could have the greatest product or the greatest service in the world, but if you're 10 years too early, you're 10 years too early, and it's going to be hard. And it's really, really hard. And, people will say, I'm not making any money, I'm going to quit. So you get a lot of turnover. So you want to find something that's not too early. And then, of course, the last piece, and arguably, the most important piece people would default to is the product and service. Is it good stuff? Is it real? Is it just an idea? Is it slideware? Where does it fall in that equation? So if you've got something good, and I would also say on the product service side, I'm certainly not a fan of the Me Too companies. Like, we've got a firewall, but our firewall goes this much faster, or we've got an IPS and we have this many more signatures. And it's sort of like we're just a new version, but we're not different, right? And there's a lot of stuff out there that's not really different. It's just the same old thing being rehashed. So Phosphorus is a great example. There aren't 100 XIoT security companies out there. There's only a few. The timing was right, things of that nature. So by pulling all those characteristics together, there's not some really complicated calculus to do this. And then at the last bit of it, it's kind of like when I was talking about joining ArcSight. You kind of go with your gut, like, yeah, does this feel right? Does this feel right? You can talk to early customers and other people, and you can try to get all these data points, but if it doesn't feel right to you, then you should probably move on, because you'll grind away, and then you'll just find out, nah, this wasn't worth it.
Yeah. I think the final thing we should cover are your books. What can you plug those? What were the books, and what did you write them about?
Sure. Yeah. My first book was on insider threats. It's called Enemy at the Water Cooler. So that was really about, all these different cases of either individuals that were planted within organizations, so spies, industrial espionage in a lot of cases, or employees that decide that they wanted to go to a competitor, and they were taking siphoning off information before they left. And these types of things happen all across many industries, but certainly in tech. And the other one was called, and this was a mouthful, Physical and Logical Security Convergence. And that one I co-authored with Bill Kroll, and Bill Kroll was with the NSA for about 35 years. And he was actually the deputy director there. Brilliant guy, great mentor. The book is very thick. It's known for being able to stop a low caliber bullet. I think at 22, you're safe. 45, 308, maybe not, but it's a very verbose book. And it was the first book that I ever wrote that was translated into Turkish, which I thought was interesting. Oh, I didn't. Who knew? Because the books they develop this flow, and they do better in certain regions and worse than others, and then you get notified by the publisher. Yeah, we're doing it in Farsi or now.
Wow.
All right, that's cool. So you find out these things. And Barnes and Noble, wherever you buy books, you pick those up.
Yeah, nice. What's the future, Brian?
I'm really enjoying what we're doing here at Sevco. I always enjoy being part of a company that's different. Riptech was different, ArcSight, Imperva, Solera. I've been fortunate that I haven't been part of any company that I would consider boring. I wouldn't join it if it was boring. So really got to bring this up and kind of build this. I'll continue to do boards, continue working closely with Phosphorus and others and investing. And, when COVID hit, I was like, okay, this is what retirement feels like. I think I don't think I'm ready for this. I started taking watch classes, like how to build watches. And I found I'm not very good at that. Not at all. And there's a lot of gears and pieces of watches sitting on the carpet around me right now that I'll never find. They're there forever. And I don't know. I think I'll just continue doing this as long as I can add value, because it's a blast. And I don't think I've got the skills to do anything else besides build security companies at this point in my career.
Love that. Brian, I wish you all the best of success with Sevco, and I'll see you soon.
Hey, thanks so much. It's great being here.
Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed today's show, please like and share with your friends and colleagues, as this is really important for the show's reach. If you'd like to be our next guest or are interested in Aspiron Search's staffing solutions, please get in touch directly with me or reach out to us via our website www.aspironsearch.com.